have very good plans, I think, for the world. But there is some fundamental things that Africa don't have today that unfortunately we're racing to catch up with you. Leapfrogging is good, but there's some steps you cannot leapfrog. You have to go through them. For example, we didn't have home telephones in many of the African homes because we went straight up to cell phones. Today, the United States, Asia, and recently the United Emirates were able to build their fundamental infrastructures. And before all of that, you got to be able to feed your people. You got to be able to educate your people. You got to be able to go to the hospital when you're sick and find a doctor there. In many of our cities in Africa, if you go, including my home city, Dakar, if you're sick, you go to a hospital. If you don't have money, you're dead. This is serious. I just come from because my aunt was sick.
That's right.
In 3 weeks, I had to pay $12,000. When majority of Africans, Senegalese, are making $70 to $80 a year. We have a huge population of young people, 400 million young people in the continent under 30 years old today. No jobs, no training, no future whatsoever. Last year we lost more than 3,000 young people dying on the ocean, try to go to chase a dream that doesn't exist in Europe. Mm-hmm. Are you following what I'm trying to say here? Our education system is crumbling. Until today, in 2017, majority of young Africans, if you leave the rural areas, are living under the tree to study a day in schools under the tree. So how can we skip those fundamental things? We don't have a good education system. We don't have a good healthcare system. We cannot feed ourselves. But then we want to build the grassroots, buildings and highways and trains and talking about the SDGs and then how we can do free trades with the US and Europe. Well, you got to take care of it's like a building without a foundation. It doesn't stand. This is where my concerns are, how we can make sure we have a strong foundation first, because we're like 50 years behind. But we cannot skip that foundation and start building floors when we don't have a foundation. And all of these things, from energy to education to agriculture, those are the 3 points I believe we need to focus on before we talk about anything. And agriculture is tied into health, because what you eat is who you become. We used to eat beer in Africa. That's why I'm into agriculture, training young people to go back in the land to feed our people. Because now we're buying food from Europe, and all this food is refrigerated. When they come, they're selling it to us, and most of the people in Africa are getting sick today with cancer, all kinds of stuff we didn't have. But all of these things, it cannot be done without leadership. It brings me to the next point. And you touch on it. If you don't have leadership, you cannot implement the change we need in the continent. In Africa, the richest people in my continent are politicians. The biggest and most beautiful homes in Africa are owned by politicians. If you want to be wealthy, you become a politician. They're the one traveling across the world. They're the one that control the country. And I think until we talk about the issue also of leadership, where we have leaders who lead in the intention to serve their countries, who can make the country dream and get them to work, and not wait for anybody, to come and change this country. I have not seen any country in the world that the World Bank has changed, or the United Nations. I don't see it. Maybe my friend ambassador from the UN can tell me. I have not seen any country in the world that those world international organizations have come and changed it for them. But I've seen some countries that it was changed by the children of those countries. Israel had the same issues that we had. They had genocide. They don't have the natural resources we had. How come Israel in less than 50 years, 60 years, is where they are today. It's hard work. You believe in yourself, you use the human capacity, and you work. But we, depending on you, Europe and you, the United States, to come and change Africa, and I know you ain't going to do it. Because even if you give me a speech, you make me believe that, yeah, we're coming to help you change Africa. I know you're coming for your pocket. It's normal. It's business. It's okay. I want you to come for your pocket. But I'm just warning you here that when you come under our new leadership, under this new generation, you will come like you come into America. I don't see any foreign leader coming to the U.S., breaking the laws, trying to do business. You end up in jail. I see businesses that come to Africa don't even respect their corporate social responsibilities. They're coming in with cash, buying politicians. You do it in America, you end up in prison. But those to be able to implement those policies, you need leadership. And this is where I'm working on, to train young people to the education and training through my foundation, for them to understand our responsibility and what we're carrying on, the legacy of the great Nkrumah and Nelson Mandela. If it wasn't for leadership, I don't think Nelson Mandela will challenge the status quo of those dark nights in South Africa. But I knew he knew that he had to lead, even if it means to sacrifice. Those pioneers that was coming in America with no lights, no nothing at those times, taking the waters from Europe. When it was hard in Ireland, there was nothing going on in Europe. They looked to come here and find new land with nothing. In less than 200 years, they built it. But let me tell you this to close, though. In my land, we have 30% of the world's natural resources. More than anybody in the world. So if we cannot succeed, I cannot blame always the past, well, because of slavery, because, no, it's excuses. I mean, come on. We've got to change it, period. And I'm not talking to you. I'm talking about any young African watching me from wherever you are around the world. Stop blaming everybody for our problems. The past is the past. There's history about it. Okay, cool. But now, we've grown. And things need to change. How come Emirates, I was just in Doha the other day, and I'm looking, I'm like, look at this. They have only few natural resources compared to everything in Africa. A desert is nothing, and look how they've changed it in less than 40 years. We can do that in Africa. We can do it.
I think you've sparked a lot. Actually, Flory, I think
100 million Africans live in the dark today. Half of the continent is the biggest in the world. If we don't do anything, nothing will happen. And without energy, you can't do anything. Right now, I'm talking to you, but as soon as the electricity was cut off in a minute, or you go home and there is no electricity or warm water, you'll be fussing and calling on somebody. Because that's something that you're used to. That's something that became so accustomed to your daily lives. But my friends, I'm here to tell you that in my home continent, in Africa, 600 million of those people never know what lights is about. They never seen electricity before. I grew up into those conditions. In my grandfather's house, I had to wake up early in the morning at 6, 7 a.m. so I can catch the sun again to finish what I didn't finish on studying the night before. That's why the work we're doing is very personal to us. You know, all across the world, there is always a generation that came and dreamed and pushed the limits in this great country that we are today in the United States. There was a young president named Kennedy who dreamed of the impossible, to go to the moon, and drove his country to push the limits. A young man like Dr. King did it here, to allow people like President Obama and myself to do the things we did not imagine in the 60s to happen in this country. A young man in Singapore did it, Lee Kuan Yew. When Malaysia left, a country with no natural resources, today is a model of nation building. So I'm here to tell you that my generation, the generation of Akon, the generation of Samba Bachili, the generation of Dangote Chonyang, and his generation, we know nothing about slavery. We know nothing about independence, even though we acknowledge the work that our founding fathers has done. I know, and I know that. When Nkrumah was dreaming about the unification of Africa, when Patrice Lumumba was talking about a change and control of our economic models in the continent, when Sékou Touré and Senghor finished school in Europe and go back to liberate our countries in Africa, such as Senegal, my home country, I knew they would not finish the work. And I knew they knew the sacrifices they were making were not for them. It was for another generation to come. It was for their children and their grandchildren. Their grandchildren is here. I'm here. We're here. And I'm here to tell you that this generation will transform the continent. We know the challenges. We've traveled the world. We've seen it. We've traveled the world. We understood the world. We've traveled the world. We know how nations are built. And we are looking for partners like you who will come to our continent in a win-win situation. But a new leadership, a new wave of change is flooding on the skies of the continent. And it will become the best of the best, and nothing but the best. This is why Akon and I are sacrificing to make sure we bring energy in the continent. This is why in my Jeff Zone project, yesterday at this time, I was in my farms with young people helping me to play our part in making sure that we feed our people. We have 35% of edible land in the continent, yet we spend $35 billion importing food in our continent. I want to do something about that. And my generation will change that. So it is to tell you that we are concerned, but we're optimistic because the challenge is high, but we really take on the challenges. And as our founding fathers, we know if we don't finish to see what we're working for, the young people that I am training through Give One Project, the young people that Tony Elemelu is training through the Tony Elemelu Foundation, the young people we're training through the Solar Academy, Akon and I Solar Academy, and etc. I am pretty sure they will take on the fight and they will change the continent. But for now, where we are doing what we can and what we can't, and to invite the diaspora to know that Africa will not change without them. Their expertise is needed in the continent. Until we come to do our part, it will not be the Africa we dream about. And I know you're telling me the time is up, but I wish you gave me 30 more minutes. Thank you so much for the introduction.
So thank you. We need more like you, and that's what I'm talking about.
All right.
Going back to what I was saying about no amount of education can change you unless your mind is in the right place. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if we can just have a few more Africans like him? And that's what we're talking about, that we need Africans who get it. A leader is as good as the people he is leading. So I am challenging the diaspora to say, don't just sit back and shoot out complaints. Don't be an empty bucket that's making noise. You got to get involved. So the diaspora, if you're listening, we need you to go home and participate in the process.
That's true.
Because the truth is, for true change to come to Africa, it has to be brought by the Africans.